How did my wife refusing to hold our daughter become the moment our marriage quietly ended? I signed the hospital papers without raising my voice. Her choice that day followed her far longer than she ever imagined. Before we continue, we ask you to hit the hype button, subscribe, and like the video to help the channel grow. Tell us which city you are from in the comments. We would like to get to know our audience better. The delivery room smelled like antiseptic and something metallic I couldn't name. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in that flat hospital white that makes people look half alive. Tessa lay on the bed, her hair dark with sweat, her face turned toward the window even though there was nothing to see out there but the brick wall of the adjacent building. Dr. Weiss stood beside her, holding our daughter, or Rina, 6 pounds, 4 ounces. Born at 3:47 in the morning after 14 hours of labor that Tessa had endured mostly in silence, refusing the epidural until the very end, claiming she wanted to feel everything. Now she wouldn't even look. "Tessa," Dr. Weiss said gently, "would you like to hold her?" Tessa didn't turn her head. Her hands stayed flat against the sheets. "I can't," she said. Not "I'm too tired" or "give me a minute." Just "I can't," like someone declining a second helping of food. Dr. Weiss glanced at me. I saw something flicker across his face, something he was trained not to show. He'd been delivering babies for 30 years, according to the framed certificate on the wall. He'd seen everything, but this made him pause. "Mr. Mercer?" he said. I stepped forward and took Rina from his hands. She was warm and impossibly small, wrapped in a hospital blanket with pink and blue stripes. Her eyes were closed, her tiny fists curled against her chest. She made a soft sound, not quite a cry, more like a question. "Hey," I whispered. "I've got you." The nurse, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and tired lines around her mouth, moved closer with a clipboard. She kept her voice low, professional. "We'll need someone to sign the birth certificate and the initial care forms," she said. "Usually both parents, but one signature is sufficient if—" She trailed off, looking at Tessa's turned back. "I'll sign," I said. The nurse nodded and set the clipboard on the rolling table beside me. I shifted Rina carefully into the crook of my left arm and picked up the pen with my right hand. The forms were straightforward. Name, date, time of birth. Mother's name, father's name. I signed where the yellow highlights indicated. Tessa still hadn't moved. Another nurse, younger, was cleaning up the medical instruments on a tray. She exchanged a look with the older nurse. No words, but I caught it. They'd seen this before, maybe, or they were just surprised. Either way, they knew something was wrong. Dr. Weiss cleared his throat softly. "Tessa, everything went well. No complications. Rina is healthy. You should rest now." "Fine," Tessa said to the window. He hesitated, then nodded at me and left the room. The younger nurse followed. The older one stayed, adjusting Tessa's IV line and checking the monitors with practiced efficiency. "Mr. Mercer," she said quietly, "will you be the primary contact for now? For updates, feeding schedule, that sort of thing?" "Yes," I said. "All right." She made a note on her tablet. "We'll move Rina to the nursery so your wife can rest. You can stay with her there if you'd like." I looked down at Rina. Her face was calm, peaceful. She didn't know yet that her mother had refused to hold her. She didn't know anything except warmth and the sound of my heartbeat. "I'll stay with her," I said. The nurse smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She led me out into the hallway, and I followed, cradling Rina against my chest. The hospital corridor was quieter now, past 4 in the morning. A janitor pushed a mop bucket down the far end, somewhere a machine beeped steadily. The nurse walked me to the nursery, a room with large windows and rows of tiny bassinets. She showed me where to sit, how to hold Rina during feeding, how to check her temperature. "You're doing great," she said, and this time her smile was real. When she left, I sat alone with my daughter under the dim lights. I looked at her face, her tiny fingers, the way her chest rose and fell with each breath. She was perfect. Completely, undeniably perfect. And Tessa wouldn't even look at her. I thought about the past 9 months. The pregnancy had been planned, or at least not prevented. Tessa had seemed excited at first, posting ultrasound pictures online, talking about nursery colors and baby names. But somewhere around the 5th month, something shifted. She stopped going to appointments. She'd say she forgot, or that they rescheduled, or that I was overreacting. I'd gone with her to the ones she couldn't avoid. I remembered sitting in the waiting room while she disappeared into the exam room alone, always insisting I didn't need to come in. "It's just routine," she'd say. "I'll tell you everything." But she never did, and when I asked, she'd get defensive. "Why are you interrogating me? Do you not trust me?" So I stopped asking. Now, holding Rina, I realized I should have pushed harder. There was something else, too. Something I'd noticed in the delivery room but hadn't fully registered until now. When I'd leaned over to take Rina from Dr. Weiss, I'd caught a smell on Tessa's hospital gown. Faint but unmistakable. Smoke, cigarette smoke. Tessa didn't admit to being a regular user of tobacco products, at least not to me. She'd quit years ago, she claimed, back in college. But I'd smelled it before, faintly, on her clothes when she came home late from book club or drinks with coworkers. She always had an explanation. Someone else had been doing it. She'd been standing near them. The smell clung to everything. I wanted to believe her. But sitting there in the nursery, holding our newborn daughter, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I stayed with Rina until the sun came up. A different nurse brought a bottle and showed me how to feed her. Rina took to it easily, her tiny mouth working at the nipple, her eyes opening briefly to look at me before closing again. "You're a natural," the nurse said. I didn't feel like one. I felt like someone trying to keep his head above water. When visiting hours officially started, I went back to Tessa's room. She was awake, sitting up in bed, scrolling through her phone. She glanced at me when I came in but didn't say anything. "Rina's doing well," I said. "She's sleeping now." "Good. Do you want to see her?" "I'm tired, Troy." "I know, but she's your daughter." Tessa finally looked at me, really looked at me, and her eyes were cold. "Don't tell me what she is," she said. "I know what she is." I stood there trying to find the right words, but before I could, a hospital social worker appeared in the doorway. Linda Karpov, according to her badge. Early 40s, dark hair pulled back, sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Good morning," she said. "I'm here to check in, see how everyone's doing. Just routine." She stepped inside, glancing between us. Her expression was neutral, but I could tell she was assessing the room, the distance between Tessa and me, the tension hanging in the air. "Everything's fine," Tessa said quickly, putting on a smile. "Just exhausted. Labor was intense." Linda nodded. "Of course. And the baby? How's she doing?" "She's perfect," I said. "Good." Linda made a note on her tablet. "And you're both comfortable with the care plan? Feeding, checkups, that sort of thing?" "Absolutely," Tessa said. "We're ready." I didn't correct her, but I noticed Linda's eyes linger on Tessa for just a moment longer than necessary. "Great," Linda said. "If you need anything, don't hesitate to call. We're here to help." She left, and Tessa went back to her phone. I stood there a moment longer, then turned and walked out. I didn't know it yet, but that was the beginning. Not of the end, exactly. The end had already started. This was just the moment I stopped pretending I didn't see it. We brought Rina home 3 days later. Tessa insisted on leaving as soon as possible, saying she hated hospitals, hated the smell, hated the constant interruptions. I packed up the room while she signed discharge papers, and then we drove home in silence. Our apartment was on the second floor of a building in a quiet neighborhood. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that opened into the living room. We'd set up the nursery in the smaller bedroom, painting the walls a soft yellow, assembling a crib that came with instructions in 3 languages and took me 6 hours to finish. Tessa went straight to our bedroom and closed the door. I carried Rina inside, still in her car seat, and set her down gently in the nursery. She was asleep, her face peaceful. I stood there watching her breathe, listening to the soft sounds she made, and tried to feel something other than the weight pressing down on my chest. The first week was harder than I expected. Rina woke every 2 to 3 hours, needing to be fed, changed, soothed. I handled most of it. Tessa helped occasionally, but only when I asked directly, and even then she seemed distracted, going through the motions without really being present. One night, around 2 in the morning, Rina started crying. I was already awake, sitting in the nursery with a book I wasn't reading, waiting for her to stir. I picked her up and carried her to the kitchen to prepare a bottle. Tessa appeared in the doorway, her hair messy, wearing an old t-shirt. "Can you keep her quiet?" she said. "I have work tomorrow." "She's a baby," I said. "She cries." "I know that, Troy. But does she have to cry so loud?" I stared at her. "Are you serious?" Tessa sighed, rubbing her eyes. "Never mind. Forget I said anything." She went back to bed. I fed Rina in the dim light of the kitchen, the only sound her soft sucking and the hum of the refrigerator. When she finished, I held her against my shoulder and walked slow circles around the living room until she fell asleep again. I started noticing more things after that. Small things, easy to dismiss individually, but together they painted a picture I didn't want to see. Tessa avoided appointments. She'd say she had meetings at work, or that she'd rescheduled, or that one of us going was enough. When I pressed, she'd get defensive. "Why are you acting like I don't care?" she'd say. I'm just busy. You know how demanding my job is. She worked in marketing for a mid-sized firm downtown. The hours were long, she said. The clients were difficult. Her boss was demanding. She came home late most nights, smelling faintly of smoke. I didn't say anything about the smoke. Not yet. But I noticed, and I started keeping track. One afternoon, I was going through the mail and found an envelope from the hospital. It was addressed to both of us, marked Important Medical. Paid to medical records. I opened it and found a summary of Tessa's prenatal care. The appointments were listed by date. There were several highlighted notes from her doctor. Patient missed scheduled ultrasound, rescheduled. Patient declined glucose tolerance test, rescheduled. Patient did not attend follow-up, called no response. I read through the entire document twice, trying to make sense of it. Tessa had told me she was going to all her appointments. She'd said everything was fine, that the baby was healthy, that there were no concerns. But according to this, she'd missed more than half of her scheduled visits. I found another page, stapled to the back, notes from a consultation with a specialist. Discussed risks of certain substances during pregnancy. Patient stated she understood, recommended cessation and follow-up monitoring. Certain substances. I sat there at the kitchen table, staring at the paper, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. That night, after Rina was asleep, I went into the living room where Tessa was watching television. I got something in the mail today, I said, sitting down beside her. Okay. She didn't look away from the screen. It was a summary from the hospital, about your prenatal care. Now she looked at me. Her expression didn't change, but I saw her shoulders tense. And? It says you missed a lot of appointments. I told you, I rescheduled some of them. It also mentions a consultation about substances. Tessa's jaw tightened. That was nothing, just standard information they give everyone. Was it? She stood up abruptly. I don't appreciate being interrogated in my own home, Troy. I went through pregnancy and labor. I did my part. If you have a problem with how I handled it, maybe you should have been more involved. I tried to be involved. You wouldn't let me come to the appointments. Because I'm an adult and I can handle a doctor's visit on my own. She walked out of the room, leaving me sitting there with the television still playing some show I wasn't watching. I didn't bring it up again, but I didn't forget either. A few weeks later, we had Rina's first pediatric checkup. I scheduled it myself, made sure Tessa knew the date and time. She said she'd come. The morning of the appointment, she texted me from work. Can't make it. Client emergency. You go. I took Rina alone. The pediatrician, Dr. Hassan, was thorough and patient. She examined Rina carefully, asking questions about feeding, sleeping, development. I answered as best I could. Everything looks good so far, Dr. Hassan said, but I'd like to keep a close eye on her developmental milestones. Premature or delayed milestones can sometimes indicate underlying issues. What kind of issues? It's too early to say, but we'll monitor her closely. Make sure she's hitting the right markers at the right times. I nodded, trying not to let the worry show on my face. And how's Mom doing? Dr. Hassan asked. Adjusting well? I hesitated. She's managing. Dr. Hassan looked at me for a moment, then nodded. Well, if either of you need support, don't hesitate to reach out. Parenting is hard, especially in the beginning. I thanked her and left with Rina, feeling like I'd just lied by omission. That night, I told Tessa what the doctor had said. She was in the kitchen, making herself a late dinner. So they're just going to watch her? She said. That's it? For now. They said it's routine. Routine, Tessa repeated, her tone flat. Everything's always routine until it's not. What's that supposed to mean? She shrugged. Nothing. Just that doctors love to make problems out of nothing. Creates job security. I didn't respond. I was too tired to argue. But I started documenting things after that. I kept a notebook in my desk drawer at work, out of sight. I wrote down dates, times, conversations, the appointments Tessa missed, the things she said, the smell of smoke I kept catching on her clothes. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I just knew I needed to keep track, because something was wrong, and it was only getting worse. Rina was 6 months old when we got the first real indication that something wasn't developing as expected. She wasn't making eye contact the way Dr. Hassan said she should. She didn't respond to her name. When I held a toy in front of her and moved it side to side, she didn't track it with her eyes. Tessa said I was overreacting. Babies develop at different rates, she said. Stop trying to turn her into a case study. But Dr. Hassan didn't think I was overreacting. She referred us to a pediatric neurologist, Dr. Patel, who specialized in developmental disorders. The appointment was scheduled for a Wednesday afternoon. I took the day off work. Tessa said she'd try to make it, but wasn't sure. She didn't make it. I sat in Dr. Patel's office alone, holding Rina in my lap while the doctor reviewed her chart. The office was small and warm, with colorful posters on the walls showing pictures of children at different developmental stages. Dr. Marlin was in her 40s, calm and precise in the way she spoke. She asked me a series of questions about Rina's behavior, her responses to stimuli, her social engagement. I answered honestly. When she finished, she set down her notes and looked at me. Mr. Mercer, based on what you've described and what I've observed today, I believe Rina is showing early signs of autism spectrum disorder. The words hung in the air. I'd expected them in some vague, unformed way, but hearing them out loud made them real. Are you sure? I asked. As sure as I can be at this stage. We'll need to do more assessments as she grows, but the signs are consistent. Early intervention can make a significant difference, so I'd recommend starting therapies as soon as possible. I nodded, trying to process. What kind of therapies? Occupational therapy, speech therapy, behavioral therapy. We'll create a care plan tailored to her needs. Okay, I said. Okay. Dr. Marlin leaned forward slightly. Mr. Mercer, I also want to ask about Rina's prenatal history. Were there any complications during pregnancy? Any concerns about substance exposure? I felt my chest tighten. Why do you ask? Because certain environmental factors during pregnancy can increase the likelihood of developmental issues. It's not always the cause, but it's worth considering. I thought about the hospital records, the missed appointments, the consultation notes about substances. There may have been some concerns, I said carefully, but my wife didn't share much detail with me. Dr. Marlin made a note. I see. Well, it's something to keep in mind. It may not be relevant, but it's part of the picture. When I left the office, I sat in the parking garage for 20 minutes, just staring at the concrete wall in front of me. Rina was asleep in her car seat in the back, oblivious to everything. I thought about Tessa, about the way she'd refused to hold Rina in the hospital, about the appointments she'd missed, about the smell of smoke, and I thought about the lies. I drove home and found Tessa on the couch, scrolling through her phone. How did it go? She asked, not looking up. She has autism, I said. Tessa's hand paused. Then she went back to scrolling. They don't know that for sure. She's only 6 months old. Dr. Marlin said the signs are consistent. She wants to start therapies. Therapies, Tessa said, her tone dismissive. They always want to do therapies. It's how they make their money. I stared at her. This is our daughter we're talking about. I know that, Troy, but I'm not going to panic over something that might not even be real. Doctors love to label things. Maybe she's just a late bloomer. And what if she's not? Tessa finally looked at me. Then we'll deal with it. But I'm not going to sit here and act like her life is over because some doctor used a scary word. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab her by the shoulders and shake her until she understood what was happening, but I didn't. I just stood there, feeling the anger and frustration build up inside me with nowhere to go. Fine, I said quietly. I'll handle it. You always do, Tessa said and went back to her phone. I went into the nursery and closed the door. Rina was still asleep in her car seat. I lifted her out carefully and held her against my chest, feeling her warmth, her tiny heartbeat. I've got you, I whispered. I'll always have you. Later that night, I went through Tessa's things. I wasn't proud of it, but I needed to know. I needed to understand what had happened during those 9 months. I found a box in the back of her closet, hidden under a stack of old sweaters. Inside were receipts, gas stations mostly, but also convenience stores, the kind that sell certain products without asking too many questions, and there were other things. Old appointment cards, crumpled and torn, notes scribbled in Tessa's handwriting. Reschedule. Skip this one. Not important. I sat on the floor of our bedroom, surrounded by evidence of choices she'd made without telling me, choices that may have affected our daughter's entire life. I didn't confront her, not yet, because I knew if I did, she'd deny it. She'd twist it around, make me the villain for not trusting her, for invading her privacy. So I took pictures of everything with my phone. I put the box back exactly where I'd found it, and I added the images to a folder on my computer, password protected, labeled Rina Care. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it, but I knew I'd need it eventually. The next few months were a blur of appointments, therapies, and routines. I took Rina to occupational therapy twice a week, speech therapy once a week, and regular checkups with Dr. Patel. I learned how to help her develop motor skills, how to encourage eye contact, how to create a structured environment that made her feel safe. Tessa came to one appointment. One. She sat in the waiting room on her phone the entire time, and when the therapist tried to talk to her afterward, she cut the conversation short, saying she had to get back to work. "Your wife seems busy," the therapist said to me later, her tone carefully neutral. "She is," I said, because it was easier than the truth. I started working from home more often so I could manage Rina's schedule. My boss, thankfully, was understanding. I was good at my job, good enough that I had leverage, and I used it. One afternoon, I got a call from Linda Karpov, the hospital social worker from the day Rina was born. I hadn't heard from her since. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "I wanted to follow up and see how things are going. We like to check in with families, especially when there are special care needs." "Things are fine," I said. "We're managing. That's good. And your wife? Is she involved in the care?" I hesitated. Linda's tone was casual, but I could hear the real question underneath. "She's involved when she can be," I said carefully. "Her work schedule is demanding." "I see." There was a pause. "Well, if you ever need resources or support, don't hesitate to reach out. We have programs for families in situations like yours." "Thank you," I said. "I appreciate it." After I hung up, I wondered what she'd meant by situations like yours, but I didn't call back to ask. I also started rebuilding connections professionally. I'd let some relationships slide over the past year, too focused on home life to keep up with networking. But now I reached out to old colleagues, set up coffee meetings, reminded people I existed. One of those people was Evan Brooks. We'd worked together years ago on a major project that had gone extremely well. He'd since moved to a senior consulting position at a different firm, one with a reputation for hiring people who could handle complex, high-stakes work. We met at a coffee shop near my office. Evan looked the same as I remembered. Sharp suit, graying hair, quick smile. "Troy," he said, shaking my hand. "It's been too long. How have you been?" "Busy," I said. "Life's been complicated." "I heard you have a kid now. Congratulations." "Thanks." We talked for a while about work, about projects we'd been on, about where the industry was heading. Eventually, Evan leaned back in his chair and gave me a considering look. "So," he said, "what's really going on? You didn't call me just to catch up?" I smiled slightly. Evan had always been perceptive. "I'm thinking about options," I said. "Long term. I need more stability, more flexibility. My daughter has special needs, and I need to be able to manage that without sacrificing my career." Evan nodded slowly. "And your current position doesn't give you that?" "It's fine for now, but I want to be prepared." "Smart," Evan said. "Let me make some calls. I know people who are always looking for solid project managers, people who value reliability and discretion." "I'd appreciate that." We shook hands again before leaving. As I walked back to my car, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Control. At home, things were deteriorating. Tessa had stopped pretending to care about Rina's development. She didn't ask about therapy sessions. She didn't attend doctor's appointments. She barely interacted with Rina at all unless I specifically asked her to watch her for an hour so I could run errands. One evening, I came home from a therapy session to find Tessa on the phone in the bedroom. The door was half open, and I heard her voice, low and irritated. "I don't know, maybe a year or two," she was saying. "I can't just leave right now. It would look bad." I stopped in the hallway, listening. "No, he doesn't suspect anything. He's too busy playing super dad to notice." My jaw tightened. I know. Just be patient. I'll figure it out." She hung up. I waited a moment, then walked into the bedroom like I hadn't heard anything. "Hey," I said. "How was your day?" "Fine," she said, slipping her phone into her pocket. "Yours?" "Good. Rina did really well in therapy today." She made eye contact with the therapist for the first time. "That's great," Tessa said, her tone flat and disinterested. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. "Yeah," I said. "It is." That night, I added a new section to my documentation folder. I labeled it Conversations. I wrote down what I'd heard, word for word. I wasn't planning revenge. Not yet. I was just preparing, building a foundation, making sure that when the time came, I'd have everything I needed. Rina turned one in early spring. I threw a small party, just a few close friends and their kids. Tessa invited her parents without telling me. Her parents, Bill and Janet, were exactly the kind of people you'd expect. Well-dressed, well-spoken, with opinions about everything and the social awareness of a brick wall. They arrived an hour late, carrying an oversized teddy bear that Rina would never play with. "Troy," Bill said, shaking my hand firmly. "Good to see you. How's work?" "Busy," I said, "but good." And this little one, Janet cooed, leaning over Rena's high chair. She's getting so big. Isn't she, Tessa? She is, Tessa said, her voice bright and cheerful, the voice she used in public. We ate cake and sang a song. Rina didn't understand what was happening, but she seemed happy enough, smacking her hands on the high chair tray and making the sounds she made when she was content. I watched her, memorizing the moment, her first birthday, the milestone Tessa had barely acknowledged. Afterward, we sat in the living room while Rina played on the floor with some soft blocks. Bill and Janet held court, talking about their recent vacation to some resort in Florida, their friends who just bought a boat, their opinions on the neighborhood association's new parking rules. Tessa nodded along, smiling at all the right moments, playing the role of dutiful daughter. I sat apart, watching the performance. This was what Tessa did best. Create an image, maintain appearances, say the right things to the right people, but underneath it all, there was nothing. No substance, no real care. At some point, Bill looked at me and said, "So, Troy, what's the plan with Rina's situation?" I felt my spine stiffen. Her situation? You know, Bill said, waving a hand vaguely. The developmental stuff. Tessa mentioned there were some concerns. I glanced at Tessa. She was looking at her phone, pretending not to listen. Of course she'd told them. Of course she'd framed it as some vague concern rather than a diagnosis. We're working with specialists, I said evenly. She's getting the care she needs. That's good, Janet said, her tone patronizing. But you have to be careful with these doctors. Sometimes they make things sound worse than they are. You don't want to label a child too early, you know. It can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. I took a slow breath, forcing myself to stay calm. The doctors have been very thorough. We're following their recommendations. Of course, Bill said, leaning back in his chair. Just saying you don't want to overreact. Kids develop at their own pace. She might just need more time. My nephew didn't talk until he was 3, and now he's a lawyer. Sometimes kids are just slower starters. She has autism, I said flatly. It's not something she's going to grow out of. The room went quiet. Janet's smile faltered. Bill shifted uncomfortably in his seat. One of the other parents, a woman I'd invited from Rina's therapy group, looked down at her plate. Well, Bill said after a moment, clearing his throat, let's not get too focused on the negative. She's a beautiful girl, that's what matters. I didn't respond. I focused on Rina, watching her stack the blocks and knock them down, her face serious and focused. She was concentrating, trying to understand how the blocks worked, how they fit together. She was learning, growing, doing exactly what she needed to do. Tessa finally looked up from her phone. Dad's right, she said. We should focus on the positives. Rina's doing fine. Troy just worries too much. I stared at her. She met my gaze, her expression calm and pleasant, like we were discussing the weather, like she hadn't just dismissed our daughter's needs in front of everyone. Excuse me, I said, standing up. I need to check on something in the kitchen. I left the room before I said something I couldn't take back. In the kitchen, I gripped the edge of the counter and counted to 10, then 20, then 30. My hands were shaking. I could hear them in the living room, the conversation resuming, Janet saying something about how stressful parenting must be, Bill making some joke about needing a drink. I looked out the window at the street below. A car drove past. A couple walked by with a dog, normal people living normal lives, unaware of the quiet rage building inside this apartment. When I came back, Bill and Janet were preparing to leave. Thanks for coming, I said, my voice controlled. Of course, Janet said, hugging Tessa. Call us soon, sweetheart. We should have you over for dinner. You too, Troy. Family dinner. It's important to stay connected. Sure, I said. And don't worry so much about Rina, Bill added, patting my shoulder. She'll be fine. Kids are resilient. Just love her and everything else will work itself out. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. They left, and the apartment felt suddenly too quiet. The other guests had filtered out during my time in the kitchen. It was just us now, me, Tessa, and Rina. Tessa started cleaning up the paper plates and cups, humming softly to herself. That went well, she said. Did it? What's that supposed to mean? Your father basically said Rina's diagnosis isn't real. Tessa shrugged, dumping plates into a trash bag. He's just old-fashioned. He doesn't mean anything by it. That generation doesn't understand all this medical terminology. And you agreed with him. I was being polite, Troy. You should try it sometime. You practically bit his head off. I looked at her, this person I'd married, this person I'd built a life with, and I didn't recognize her anymore. He dismissed our daughter's condition, and you backed him up. I didn't back him up. I just didn't want to make a scene at her birthday party. Is that so wrong? You made it sound like I'm overreacting, like I'm the problem. Tessa tied off the trash bag and set it by the door. Maybe you are overreacting. Maybe if you spent less time documenting everything and more time just being present, you'd see that Rina is fine. She's not fine, Tessa. She has autism. She needs therapies and structure and consistency, things you've never provided. Here we go again, Tessa said, her voice rising. Everything's always my fault. I'm always the bad guy. You know what? I'm tired of it. I'm tired of being judged. I'm tired of feeling like nothing I do is ever good enough for you. That's because nothing you do is for her. It's all for you, for your image, for your parents, for everyone except the person who actually matters. Tessa's face flushed red. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? She grabbed her purse from the couch. I'm not doing this right now. I'm leaving. Fine, I said. I'll be in the nursery. She walked out without another word, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. I spent the rest of the evening with Rina, reading to her, playing with her, making sure she knew she was loved. Because if her own mother wouldn't do it, I would. I'd do it every single day for the rest of her life, if that's what it took. 2 weeks later, Tessa announced we were going to her parents' house for dinner. She framed it as a family obligation, something we couldn't avoid. They want to spend time with Rina, she said. It's important for her to know her grandparents. I didn't want to go, but I also didn't want to give her ammunition to use against me later, so I agreed. We drove out to their house on a Saturday evening, a large colonial in the suburbs with a manicured lawn and a 2-car garage. Bill opened the door, all smiles and handshakes. Come in, he said. Dinner's almost ready. Janet's been cooking all afternoon. The house smelled like roasted meat and something sweet baking in the oven. Janet greeted us in the foyer, taking Rina from my arms and cooing over her. She's such a doll, Janet said. Aren't you, sweet girl? Come see what Grandma made for you. She carried Rina into the kitchen. I followed, watching as Janet showed Rina a plate of cookies shaped like animals. Rina looked at them but didn't reach out. She rarely showed interest in food unless it was part of her routine. She's probably not hungry yet, I said. Nonsense, Janet said. Every child loves cookies. Here, sweetheart, try one. She held a cookie near Rina's mouth. Rina turned her head away. She doesn't like new foods, I explained. She has sensory sensitivities. We're working with an occupational therapist on it. Janet frowned. Well, that seems silly. A cookie is a cookie. She'll eat it when she's hungry enough. I bit back a response and took Rina from her arms. I'll feed her later, when she's ready. We sat down to dinner in their formal dining room. The table was set with china and cloth napkins. Bill carved the roast while Janet served side dishes. Green beans, mashed potatoes, rolls. Everything precise and proper. The conversation started pleasantly enough. Work, weather, neighborhood gossip. Janet talked about the new family that had moved in down the street. Bill complained about the city council's decision to repave the roads. Tessa nodded along, adding comments here and there, playing her role. Then Bill turned to me. So, Troy, he said, setting down his fork. Tessa tells us you've been spending a lot of time at home lately, working remotely. Part of the time, I said. I need to be available for Rina's appointments. Of course, Bill said, his tone suggesting he didn't think it was of course at all. But you don't want to let your career slide, do you? A man's work is important, provides stability for the family. Can't do that if you're always running to doctor's appointments. I set down my fork carefully. I'm managing both just fine. I'm sure you are, Janet said quickly, trying to smooth over the tension. But it must be hard on Tessa, having so much responsibility at home. She's always been such a dedicated worker. It must be difficult for her to balance everything. I looked at Tessa. She was cutting her food, not meeting my eyes. Her face was neutral, carefully blank. Tessa doesn't have much responsibility at home, I said. I handle most of Rina's care. Bill frowned. Well, that's not ideal, is it? A child needs her mother. That's just nature. Women are built for nurturing. Men provide. That's how it's supposed to work. Rina has me, I said, my voice tight. That's what matters. The table went silent. Janet cleared her throat nervously. I think what Bill means is that it's important for both parents to be involved. Balance, you know. Tessa works so hard, but I'm sure she does everything she can at home, too. I'm sure, I said, my tone flat. Tessa finally spoke. Troy's just stressed, she said, her voice soft and apologetic. He doesn't mean to sound harsh. It's been a difficult year. Between Rina's diagnosis and work and everything else, we're both stretched thin. It has, I agreed, looking directly at her. Very difficult. Bill changed the subject, launching into a story about someone from his golf club. Janet brought out dessert. The rest of the dinner passed in strained politeness, everyone pretending the tension hadn't happened, everyone maintaining the facade. When we finally left, I felt like I'd been through a battle. Tessa was quiet in the car, staring out the window as the suburbs gave way to the city. "Did you have to be so rude?" she said finally. "I wasn't rude," I said. "I was honest." "You made me look bad in front of my parents." "You made yourself look bad." She didn't respond. She just stared out the window, her jaw tight, her hands clenched in her lap. When we got home, she went straight to the bedroom and closed the door. I put Rina to bed, read her a story, and sat with her until she fell asleep. Then I went to my desk and opened the documentation folder. I added notes about the dinner, about what Bill and Janet had said, about how Tessa had deflected and lied, about how she'd let them criticize me without saying a word in my defense. The folder was getting thick. I had medical records, appointment logs, receipts, notes from conversations, recordings of voicemails Tessa had left saying she couldn't make it to yet another therapy session. I had photographs of the box I'd found in her closet. I had timestamps and dates and facts. I had everything I needed. Now I just had to decide what to do with it. But deep down, I already knew. The decision had been made months ago, maybe even in that delivery room when she'd turned her face away from our daughter. I just hadn't admitted it to myself yet. I closed the folder and shut down the computer. Soon, I thought. Soon. The decision came a month later, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I'd taken Rina to another therapy session. She was making progress, small but real. The therapist said she was responding better to structured play, showing more engagement with toys and people. She'd even started making some attempts at eye contact, brief but meaningful. "She's doing really well," the therapist told me. "You're doing everything right. Consistency is key with autism, and you've provided that in spades." I thanked her and strapped Rina into her car seat. On the drive home, I felt something like hope. Rina was growing, learning. She would be okay. We would be okay. When I got home, Tessa was in the living room with her laptop open. She looked up when I came in, and something in her expression made me pause. She'd been waiting for me. "We need to talk," she said. I set Rina down in her playpen, giving her one of her favorite textured blocks to hold. Then I turned to face Tessa. "Okay." "I've been thinking," she said, closing her laptop slowly, deliberately. "This isn't working. Our marriage." I felt something cold settle in my chest, but I wasn't surprised. If anything, I'd been expecting this. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm not happy. I haven't been for a long time. And I think we both know that." She paused, waiting for me to argue. When I didn't, she continued. "I think we should separate, maybe eventually go through with ending things legally. But we should start by living apart." "And Rina?" Tessa hesitated, and in that hesitation, I saw everything I needed to know. She hadn't thought about Rina, or if she had, she'd thought about her as an afterthought, a detail to be managed. "We'll figure that out," she said finally. "Shared arrangement, probably. You take her during the week, I take her on weekends. That's fair, right?" I stared at her. "You can't take care of her for a weekend." "Excuse me?" "You don't go to her appointments. You don't know her routines. You don't know which foods she'll eat or which sounds upset her or how to calm her down when she's overwhelmed. You don't even spend time with her unless I ask you to." Tessa's face flushed. "That's not fair. I've been busy with work. That doesn't mean I don't care about her." "Doesn't it? You know what, Troy?" She stood up, her voice rising. "This is exactly why I want to leave. You've turned into this judgmental, controlling person. Everything I do is wrong. Everything. I can't breathe in this house without you criticizing me." "I'm not being controlling," I said evenly. "I'm being a parent, something you've refused to do since the day she was born." Tessa's hands were shaking. "That's not true. You just set impossible standards that no one could meet. You document everything, you hover over every little detail, you act like you're the only one who knows how to take care of her. Maybe if you gave me a chance." "I gave you chances," I interrupted, "for over a year. Every appointment you missed was a chance. Every night you came home late smelling like smoke was a chance. Every time you looked at Rina like she was a burden instead of a child was a chance. You had hundreds of chances, Tessa. You chose not to take any of them." Her face went pale. For a moment, I thought she might cry. But then her expression hardened. "I'm done with this conversation. I'll stay at my parents' place for a few days. We can talk when you've calmed down." "Fine," I said. "Go." She grabbed her purse and walked toward the door. Then she stopped, her hand on the knob, and turned back. You think you're so perfect. You think you're the hero here, but you're not. You're just a man who's so obsessed with being right that he can't see how much damage he's causing. The only damage here is what you did to Rina before she was even born, I said quietly, and we both know it. Tessa's eyes widened slightly. Then she yanked the door open and walked out, slamming it behind her hard enough to make the windows rattle. I stood there for a moment, listening to Rina babble softly in her playpen. Then I got up, picked her up, and held her close. It's just us now, I said quietly. And that's okay. That's better than okay. Rina made a soft sound and rested her head against my shoulder. I held her there, feeling her warmth, her trust, and knew with absolute certainty what I needed to do next. The next day, I called a lawyer. His name was Richard Stokes, and he came highly recommended by Evan. We met in his office downtown, a sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The furniture was expensive, the walls decorated with framed law degrees and professional certifications. Tell me what's going on, Richard said, leaning back in his leather chair. I told him everything. The refusal to hold Rina in the hospital, the missed appointments, the smell of smoke I'd noticed throughout the pregnancy and after, the prenatal records showing missed consultations, the phone conversation I'd overheard where Tessa had talked about leaving in a year or two, the dinner at her parents' house where she'd let them dismiss Rina's diagnosis, her recent suggestion of separation and the completely unrealistic custody arrangement she'd proposed. Richard listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. His handwriting was small and precise. When I finished, he set down his pen and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Do you have documentation for any of this? He asked. I pulled a flash drive from my pocket and handed it to him. Everything's on there. Medical records, appointment logs, photos of receipts, recordings of voicemails, notes from conversations. I've been keeping track since Rina was born. Richard took the flash drive and turned it over in his hand. This is thorough. Very thorough. I knew I'd need it eventually. He plugged the drive into his computer and spent several minutes reviewing the contents. His expression remained neutral, professional, but I saw his eyebrows raise slightly when he opened the folder of receipt photos. Finally, he unplugged the drive and handed it back to me. Mr. Mercer, based on what you've told me and what I've just reviewed, you have a strong case for primary custody. A very strong case. Your wife's behavior during pregnancy, her lack of involvement in your daughter's care, the documented evidence of substance use, all of that will work heavily in your favor. I felt something unclench in my chest. What about her parents? They'll back her up. They have money. They can afford good lawyers. Let them, Richard said calmly. Their testimony won't outweigh documented facts. They can claim whatever they want about your wife being a devoted mother, but the medical records, the appointment logs, the therapist observations, those speak louder than any character witness. And if she tries to paint you as the problem, the records will speak for themselves. You've been the primary caregiver since day one. That's indisputable. So, we move forward? We move forward, Richard said. But I need you to understand something. This won't be easy. She'll fight. She'll try to make you look bad. She'll use every tool she has. Her parents will fund an aggressive defense. They'll try to claim you're controlling, that you've isolated her, that you're using Rina as a weapon. Are you prepared for that? I am, I said without hesitation. Good. Richard stood and extended his hand. I'll start preparing the paperwork. In the meantime, keep doing what you're doing. Be present for your daughter, document everything, and don't engage with your wife unless absolutely necessary. No arguments, no confrontations. If she tries to provoke you, walk away. Everything from this point forward could potentially be used in court. Understood. We shook hands. As I left his office, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not quite relief. The battle hadn't even started yet. But something close to it. Clarity, maybe. Certainty that I was doing the right thing. I went home and held Rina, feeling the weight of everything that was about to happen settle over me. This wasn't over, but we'd taken the first step. That was enough for now. When I got home, Tessa had left a voicemail. Her voice was tight, controlled. I'm coming by tomorrow to pick up some of my things. I'll text you when I'm on my way. She showed up the next afternoon with her mother. I opened the door and stepped aside, letting them in without a word. Janet immediately went to the nursery, picking up Rina and cooing over her. Tessa went to the bedroom and started packing clothes into a suitcase, moving quickly, efficiently, like she'd been planning this for a while. I stood in the hallway, watching, not interfering, but not leaving either, making my presence known. You know, Janet said, coming out of the nursery with Rina on her hip, this is all very unnecessary. You two could work this out if you just communicated better. Every marriage has rough patches. We communicated fine, I said. The problem isn't communication. What is the problem, then? Janet's tone was pointed, accusatory. Ask your daughter. Janet frowned, but she didn't push. She looked at Rina, at me, and something flickered across her face. Doubt, maybe, or concern. But then she smoothed it away, replacing it with the same pleasant mask she always wore. She handed Rina to me and went to help Tessa pack. When they finished, Tessa carried 2 large suitcases to the door. She looked at me, her expression unreadable. I'll be in touch, she said. I'm sure you will. She hesitated, like she wanted to say something else. But then she just shook her head and left with her mother. The apartment felt bigger, emptier, but also cleaner somehow, like something toxic had been removed, and now the air could circulate properly again. I closed the door and locked it. Just us, I said to Rina, who was looking at me with her wide, curious eyes. And that's all we need. The legal process moved slowly at first, then all at once. Richard filed the initial paperwork 2 weeks after our meeting. Tessa was served at her parents' house. She called me that night, her voice shaking with anger and something else. Disbelief, maybe. You can't be serious, she said. You're actually doing this? I am, I said calmly. You're trying to take Rina away from me. I'm trying to protect her. Protect her from what? From her own mother? If necessary, yes. There was a long silence. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, quick and shallow. You're going to regret this, she said finally. My parents have already called their lawyer. We're going to fight this, and we're going to win. Maybe, I said, or maybe the truth will finally matter. She hung up on me. The next day, she hired her own lawyer, a woman named Patricia Crane, known for aggressive tactics and expensive fees. Bill and Janet must have been footing the bill. Patricia had a reputation for taking high-conflict family cases and turning them into battles. She was exactly the kind of lawyer Tessa would choose. Patricia sent a letter to Richard outlining Tessa's position. She claimed I was controlling, emotionally distant, and using Rina as a tool for manipulation. She said Tessa had been an involved mother, but that I'd shut her out, refusing to let her participate in care decisions. She claimed I'd created an environment where Tessa felt criticized and unwelcome, driving her away from her own daughter. It was a complete fabrication, and Richard tore it apart with the documentation I'd provided. They're bluffing, Richard said when we met to review the response. They don't have evidence because there isn't any. All we have to do is present the facts. The medical records alone destroy their narrative. But I need you to be prepared. They're going to try to discredit you. They'll claim you manipulated the evidence, that you're obsessive, that you're doing this out of spite. And what if they try to fabricate their own facts? Then we'll prove they're lying. Trust me, Troy, this is what I do. I've seen cases like this before. The parent with the documentation wins. Always. The first court date was set for early summer, a preliminary hearing to review custody arrangements while the case was pending. Richard prepared me thoroughly. He walked me through potential questions, showed me how to answer without getting emotional, explained what the judge would be looking for. I arrived early on the day of the hearing, dressed in a suit I'd bought specifically for this. Richard met me outside the courtroom, briefcase in hand. Remember, he said, stay calm. Answer questions directly. Don't get defensive. Don't volunteer information. Let the evidence do the work. Patricia is going to try to provoke you. Don't take the bait. Got it. Tessa arrived a few minutes later with Patricia. She looked smaller than I remembered, her face pale and tense. She wore a conservative dress, her hair pulled back, minimal makeup, the image of a struggling mother doing her best. She glanced at me once, then looked away quickly. The judge, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, called the hearing to order. She reviewed the preliminary filings, asking a few clarifying questions. Then she invited both sides to present their positions. Patricia spoke first, outlining Tessa's request for joint custody with a schedule that would give Tessa primary physical custody. She painted a picture of a devoted mother who'd been unfairly shut out by a controlling husband. She claimed Tessa had tried to be involved, but that I'd made it impossible, criticizing her every move, documenting her every action like she was a criminal. My client loves her daughter, Patricia said, her voice ringing with conviction. She wants nothing more than to be a part of Rina's life. But Mr. Mercer has created an environment of hostility and surveillance. He's used his wife's work schedule against her, weaponized medical records, and now he's trying to remove her from her child's life entirely. This is not about what's best for Rina. This is about control. Then Richard stood up. He started with the hospital. The refusal to hold Rina. The nurse's notes documenting Tessa's detachment. Dr. Weiss's observations about her lack of engagement. He moved to the prenatal records, the missed appointments, the consultation about substance exposure, the documented concerns from multiple healthcare providers. He presented appointment logs showing that Tessa had attended exactly 3 of Rina's 37 medical appointments over the past year. He showed records of therapy sessions where Tessa's name appeared on the contact list but where she'd never once shown up. He played a recording of a voicemail where Tessa said she couldn't deal with this right now when I'd asked her to watch Rina for an hour so I could attend a mandatory work meeting. He showed receipts from convenience stores, time-stamped throughout the pregnancy for products that shouldn't have been purchased by someone carrying a child. By the time he finished, the courtroom was silent. Even Patricia looked shaken. The judge looked at Tessa. "Ms. Mercer, do you have a response to this evidence?" Patricia leaned over and whispered something to Tessa. Tessa shook her head, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "We dispute the characterization of this evidence," Patricia said, standing. "My client has been dealing with significant stressors, including the demands of her career and the challenges of raising a child with special needs. She's done the best she could under difficult circumstances. These documents are being taken out of context and weaponized against her." "And the prenatal records?" the judge asked, her tone sharp. "The missed appointments? The consultation notes about substance exposure?" "My client was overwhelmed during her pregnancy. She made some mistakes, yes, but that doesn't make her an unfit mother. Many women struggle during pregnancy. That doesn't mean they should lose their children." The judge leaned back in her chair, studying Tessa with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Ms. Crane, I've seen many cases like this. What I'm seeing here isn't a parent who made mistakes under stress. I'm seeing a pattern of neglect and avoidance. And more troubling, I'm seeing a pattern of deception." Patricia opened her mouth to respond, but the judge held up a hand. "I'm granting temporary primary custody to Mr. Mercer, with supervised visitation for Ms. Mercer pending further evaluation." Tessa's face went white. Her hands started shaking. Patricia stood up quickly. "Your Honor, that's extremely—" "My decision is made," the judge said firmly. "We'll reconvene in 3 months for a full hearing. In the meantime, I'm ordering a home evaluation for both parties and a psychological assessment for both parents. Ms. Mercer, I suggest you use this time to demonstrate that you can be a responsible parent. Mr. Mercer, continue doing what you're doing." She struck her gavel, and the hearing was over. I walked out of the courtroom with Richard, feeling like I could finally breathe. The late spring air was warm, the sun bright. "That went better than expected," Richard said. "But don't get complacent. The full hearing will be tougher. They'll come at you harder. They'll try to find anything they can use against you." "I know," I said, "but we're on the right track." "We are. Just stay the course. Keep being the parent you've been. Document everything. And if she tries to contact you outside of the approved channels, let me know immediately." "I will." I went home and held Rina, feeling the weight of everything that had just happened settle over me. This wasn't over, but we'd won the first round, and that was enough for now. The home evaluation took place 3 weeks later. A court-appointed evaluator named Ms. Freeman came to the apartment on a Thursday morning. She was professional and thorough, asking questions about routines, care plans, safety measures. She spent an hour observing me with Rina. I fed her, played with her, showed Ms. Freeman the therapy schedules and medical records I kept organized in a binder. "You're very prepared," Ms. Freeman said, making notes on her tablet. "I have to be," I said. "Rina's needs are complex. There's no room for improvisation." Ms. Freeman nodded. "And her mother? How involved is she currently?" "She has supervised visits twice a week. She shows up, but she's distant. She doesn't engage with Rina the way she should." "I'll be observing one of those visits," Ms. Freeman said. The supervised visit happened the following week. It took place at a neutral location, a family center with a play area and observation rooms. I brought Rina and waited while Tessa arrived with Patricia. The supervisor, Ms. Rellin, led Tessa into the play area. I watched from behind a one-way mirror. Tessa sat on the floor with Rina, but she didn't seem to know what to do. She held out a toy, but Rina didn't respond. Tessa tried talking to her, but her voice was stiff, uncomfortable. After 20 minutes, Tessa stood up and told Ms. Rellin she needed a break. She went into the hallway and made a phone call. Ms. Freeman made a note on her tablet. "How does this compare to her usual visits?" she asked. "It's pretty typical," I said. "She shows up because she has to, but she's not really present." The psychological assessments came next. I met with a court psychologist, Dr. Morris, for 3 sessions. He asked about my childhood, my relationship with Tessa, my approach to parenting. I answered honestly. "You seem very calm," Dr. Morris observed, "given everything you're going through." "Falling apart won't help, Rina," I said, "so I stay focused." Dr. Morris nodded, making notes. Tessa's sessions didn't go well. Richard said Dr. Morris had expressed concerns about her emotional detachment and her tendency to deflect responsibility. The full hearing was scheduled for late September. Tessa missed 2 supervised visits. She sent angry texts accusing me of ruining her life. Richard collected everything. "She's building our case for us," he said. The hearing arrived on a cool September morning. The courtroom was the same, but the atmosphere was different. This wasn't preliminary. This was final. Patricia called Tessa to the stand first. She testified about how much she loved Rina, how hard she'd tried to be a good mother, how I'd made everything difficult. Then Richard cross-examined her. "Ms. Mercer," he said, "you testified that you've tried to be involved in Rina's care. Is that correct?" "Yes," Tessa said. "Can you tell me how many of Rina's therapy sessions you've attended in the past year?" Tessa hesitated. "I don't know exactly. Several." "According to the records, you've attended 3 out of 72 sessions. Does that sound accurate?" Tessa's face flushed. "I had work commitments." "And yet Mr. Mercer attended all 72 sessions while maintaining full-time employment. Can you explain that discrepancy?" Patricia objected. The judge overruled. Richard continued. "Ms. Mercer, during your pregnancy, did you use tobacco products?" "No." Richard pulled out a document. "This is a receipt from a convenience store dated 4 months into your pregnancy. Can you explain this?" Tessa stared at the receipt. "That's not mine." "It was purchased on your credit card." "Then someone else used my card." "And this one?" Richard produced another receipt. "And this one?" Tessa didn't answer. Richard turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I have 17 receipts spanning the duration of Ms. Mercer's pregnancy, all purchased on her credit card, all for the same product." The judge looked at Tessa. "Ms. Mercer, do you have an explanation?" Tessa's hands were shaking. I made mistakes, but that doesn't mean I'm a bad mother. It means," the judge said quietly, "that you put your child at risk before she was even born. And then you lied about it." Richard called me to the stand. I testified about Rina's care, the routines I'd built, the progress she'd made. I spoke calmly, factually. Patricia tried to rattle me during cross-examination, suggesting I'd manipulated the evidence, that I was using Rina to punish Tessa. "I'm not punishing anyone," I said. "I'm protecting my daughter. That's my only goal." The judge called for closing arguments. Patricia painted Tessa as a victim. Richard pointed to the evidence. "Your Honor," Richard said, "the facts speak for themselves. Mr. Mercer has been the sole provider of care for his daughter since birth. Ms. Mercer has not. This is about what's best for a child who deserves better." The judge took a short recess. When she returned, her expression was set. "I've reviewed all the materials presented," she said. "The medical records, the evaluations, the testimony, and I've reached a decision." She looked at me, then at Tessa. "I'm granting full custody to Mr. Mercer." Tessa gasped. Patricia stood to object, but the judge held up a hand. "My decision is final. Mr. Mercer has demonstrated consistent, responsible care for a child with complex needs. Ms. Mercer has not." She struck her gavel. It was over. I walked out of the courtroom into the autumn afternoon. Richard shook my hand. "You did it," he said. I drove home. The neighbor handed Rina to me with a smile. "How did it go?" "We won," I said. I carried Rina inside and closed the door behind us.